The June 6th Planning Board meeting will come to order. If there are people online, since this is hybrid, who would care to watch the meeting view only, you can go to YouTube. If you would prefer to make comments during the public comment period, you may join it via the Zoom call. If you please go to the town website, look under the planning board, look under the agenda for tonight, and you will see the codes for each of those, for YouTube and for Zoom. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do we have the minutes? I'm sorry, I don't have a copy. All right, I simply don't have a copy. So I'm going to ask Roger to lead the approval of the minutes, please, since I don't have a copy. Okay. The plan appears that the planning board is well prepared and does not have a copy of the June 16th minutes, so we will hold that approval until the next planning board meeting. Thank you.
Oh, one.
Let us, yeah, he does. Let us do the roll call. Doreen?
Karen Shoup. Here. Ed Reed. Roger Bailey.
Here.
Rachel Hendrickson.
Here.
And Richard Dewberry.
Here.
Because Rich Monking and Jan Ladd are both out tonight, both of our alternates, Karen Shoup and Chad Reed, will be voting members. Item number 5, the planning board will conduct a public hearing to receive comments on amendments to the official zoning ordinance to modify sections 4 administration and 4 and 6 definitions to include language regarding manufactured homes and manufactured housing for the town. Eric?
Our attorney, Phil Sauce, should be on Zoom. And Phil, I think we're promoting you right now, so feel free to jump in whenever you can.
Great, thanks. I'm here.
Thank you, Phil. You're up.
Okay, yeah, I'm happy to jump in. So this is a project that I worked on with Jay Chase and Brian Longstaff and now Eric at the direction of the council's ordinance committee. There is a very outdated and old ordinance in your code of ordinances called trailer camp. I'm getting the exact language up here. Trailers and trailer camps ordinance, which uses both outdated language and and provisions that are no longer necessary. So this came up as a sort of work item to look at this. So we've met with the ordinance committee on a number of occasions at this point. The idea behind this particular ordinance update was not to change anything substantively, but to go through this ordinance and pull out if there was anything that should stay, and otherwise to repeal the rest. So what you have before you are, and I don't know if you have the whole thing, but we essentially broke it up into 2 categories. One is the council did indicate that it would like to continue to have a license for what are now called manufactured housing communities in the new ordinance. Used to be called trailer camps. And so that's a licensing, annual license the town has been doing for many years. So we updated the language and kept that in a new licensing ordinance, which contains the very basic provisions. And then a second part, which would amend the zoning ordinance to pull over some performance standards from this ordinance that the town staff wanted to keep. Essentially, it's some of the provisions about ground layout, area requirements, things like that. So again, the idea was not to substantively change any of this, is to put it in the right place, update terminology, and that kind of thing. So that's what you have before you, is this new performance standard and changing of terminology to update based on state law. And I should say, and some feedback from manufactured housing communities in the town.
Thank you. This is subject to public comment, so we have received a communication from Teresa Desfas, and we will include that in the record. Is there anybody from the community, any member of the public here tonight who would like to speak to this? Yes.
I'm Teresa's daughter, Tina. and
Okay,
she asked me to
please
present.
stand, just,
Sure.
you don't have to justify, just make sure that you're speaking into the microphone.
Okay, I just wanted to explain I made 9 copies of the same thing that I'm going to be reading to you right now, okay?
Please don't read it to us because we certainly can read it. Please, if you would summarize the major points that you think the town council should be aware of.
Okay,
We have the whole document here.
okay. So some of the parts that that don't agree with Maine law, should I point that out that
Certainly.
I did,
You have them?
it looks like this, it says
Yeah,
numbers.
he's found it.
Okay.
It's okay.
Okay, so manufactured housing, we have specified in the law that was changed from 8 body feet or more in width or 40 body feet and more in length. And the town attorney found the definition included it in the proposed changes. It's not the definition of the federal HUD code. It is my belief, and that's my mom is writing that federal law preempts state law and that there's no reason to include any incorrect definitions. The dimensions included in the definition are very important and should be correct by changing the dimensions of the homes that comply with the Scarborough zoning ordinance, even though they would not comply with the HUD code and would have this HUD seal affixed and would not comply with the town of Scarborough. So if I just go on, I want to direct your attention to replace number 1 with number 4. The minimum lot size should read 2,100 square feet. And this change would allow for the flexibility in community design. There were some issues with the 30 by 70 feet long lots don't exactly work, especially in the older sections of our communities where the homes tend to be more affordable. My mother wanted to point out to you, and I would as well, that some of the lots were made back in the 40s when my grandparents started the community. So they're not quite as long as some of the homes now because they literally were hauled behind a truck instead of a big manufactured housing toter like we have now. My mother also would like to direct the attention to the manufactured housing community shall be arranged in rows. We were wondering if that was for a specific purpose or if that was just reiterating some language left over from the house car trailer ordinance. Because now we sometimes maybe have a bend in the road and the house might be set this way instead of straight. So we just wanted to point out that we don't really feel like it's necessarily a good idea to include in rows in our rules. Why should this be the rule for a manufactured housing community? Do other housing developments require that the site-built homes are built in rows as well? And no manufactured homes shall be permitted to park closer than 5 feet to the sidelines. So in state law, we take the wheels and axles off the home and the home is permanent unless it decides to leave again, in which case I would need to buy new wheels and axles and have it moved. So we were hoping that the language park could be changed to maybe sited or built or something that is a little more friendly to housing and not make it sound like it's just there temporarily. They're not parked, they're installed. Another point that will get kind of messed up with the new wording is that many of the people that live in the older section of our communities have lots, and they want to also have maybe like a little shed to put their trash barrels, and say they want, like, you know, shovels or a lawnmower or something. So they would be able to have up to a 10 by 12 shed. And in this, the way that the law is written now, or the way that the ordinance is written, a lot of those buildings will not be far enough apart to achieve that. So we were wondering if you could help us by grandfathering some of those lots. And they're even bigger in the newer section, so I don't need to worry about that at all. And I just wanted to point out again to you that it's one contiguous piece of property. It's not separated but with a deed. So that is what else she wanted to make sure was said. Just to end, State Manufactured Homes intends to oppose Chapter 1019 when it comes before the town council, not only because manufactured housing communities and homes are already licensed by the state, but requiring a license for manufactured housing communities by the town of Scarborough is discriminatory and demeaning to the residents of manufactured housing communities. No other permanent housing or housing communities are licensed by the town of Scarborough, and there's no rational reason exists as to why Scarborough would be licensing this housing. Please consider the changes I have brought forward and recommend to the changes to the committee, ordinance committee, and the town council for their consideration. And that's signed Teresa DeFossis, who's my mom and also my boss.
Thank you. And your name is again, please?
I'm Tina Marie Smith.
All right, thank you very much, Tina.
And does anyone have any questions for me that,
This is basically a public hearing.
okay,
And we will end up making comments to the town council.
okay,
So what has been read into the record will also be available to them.
okay,
And they will be able to see what you have said tonight.
okay, good.
And also the material presented through you from your mother.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? He's perfectly welcome to speak. Yeah, 3 minutes. 3 minutes. I know you go by the word, but come on. So 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Alan Beagle, and I represent State Manufactured Homes, the DeFoss family. The principal, the family was not had several items of input to the ordinance committee, many of which were considered, not all of which, and many of which were not. The statements that Tina has made and referred to are the comments to the matters that were handled or handed out to you as a packet before by Jay as tonight. And so the references are to the particular provisions of section 405 of the zoning ordinance that are proposed. And that's really all that's before you tonight as the planning board are the changes to the zoning ordinance. And we had proposed, State Manufactured Homes had proposed that the ordinance be modified, that the current ordinance be repealed, and the staff agrees with that. That's chapter 500. But we had suggested and strongly believe that the statute governing manufactured homes in Scarborough is preempted and by the state law, which is totally inclusive of all provisions in terms of performance standards and otherwise. And that is to create a provision or a licensing ordinance as is suggested would lead to incongruities between state law and the town of Scarborough, and require the town of Scarborough to hire someone to understand state manufactured housing. And the manufactured housing board for the state of Maine is directly is created and fully capable and does administer manufactured housing communities in the state of Maine. And I realize that the ordinance, which is proposed, will be before the town council, but the amendments that are to the zoning ordinances or to the planning board's items in its jurisdiction are inconsistent with the state law to the extent pointed out, and the federal law as pointed out by Teresa DeFazis in the memorandum she submitted. And to that extent, she suggests, and I would suggest to the planning board that you refer this to the ordinance committee for further consideration before adopting the proposed language to the zoning ordinances that are set forth to you in the memorandum attached tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else on this topic? Eric, do you have anyone online? Or Angela? All right, thank you. To the planning board, our mission really is to conduct a public hearing. And at this point, I would like to just call your attention to page 4 of your packet, the material from the town that basically covers the ordinance. Last page. And those are the performance standards. In general, these are the standards that are being proposed to apply to the planning board. It's the standards that allow us to determine if a house is appropriately sited, if any design standards are met, any siting standards, any landscaping, anything else. That's usually what we find in performance standards. And this is the most germane section for the planning board. Whether state law preempts town regulations, that's really not part of our discussion. That's left to the attorneys to wrestle it out in court. It should be interesting, but that is not our purview tonight. We are conducting a public hearing. Saying that, does anybody have any questions or comments? Any additional recommendations to go forward?
I mean, generally speaking, are you wanting us just to look at the last page in the performance?
No,
standards?
I'm saying that they are particularly germane
Right.
to us. So on the other hand, it's very likely that material concerning manufactured home developments could come before us. So if there are other things to take a look at that you feel have not been covered under this ordinance, or advice that you would like to give to the town council,
Sure.
this would be the time.
Somewhat new to planning board, maybe if
Okay.
these comments aren't particular to that, but what I'm hearing, especially from the public, and I want to respond is, and maybe, our town attorney can comment to it, is she's saying there's conflicting between HUD and town. I'd like to clarify.
That's,
And I don't.
that would
so-
not,
so
really,
should
that wouldn't
kick
come
that
under.
Back to ordinance committee, or if that's a concern that the residents are having. And then I think generally when I hear someone from the public come and speak and they're saying, why are you charging us a licensing fee on top of the state
That's-
doing that? That's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
Are those concerns that we would say maybe this should go back to the ordinance committee if we're seeing and residents are raising concerns about confliction between the laws? And I mean, this seems.
Presumably from this meeting and the comments that people have made, the town council might refer this to the ordinance committee. The ordinance committee could take it and revise it. I have a couple of notes
Yeah.
as well. I think you've raised good questions that need to be looked at, but they've already been raised.
Yep.
So what we don't have are answers to give. at this point. We're hearing what folks are saying.
I mean, I think I would just say generally, I think I would agree that I think the verbiage of rows can be restrictive. And I appreciate that feedback from them.
Do we have? All right, Roger?
I would agree with regarding the range and rows, because, I mean, the road can be bent or curved, and the homes would probably be still lined up according to, I think what you're saying is, you're sort of implying that everything's going to be a grid.
No.
That's okay.
That's because we have we've heard from you. So Roger is bringing up a point that you've made and expressing a question about it. And that's, again, will be in the record and can go forward to ordinance and council.
Yeah, basically what I'm getting at is I think the wording, some of the wording, like she brought up the word park. And you know, if you go back like 50 years, I mean, these were trailers at one time. And now they're actually a home. You know, they're a state, you know, they're grounded and everything. So I think some of the wording could be better than what's in this recommendation. And the only other observation I would make is that I don't think that these manufactured homes should be treated any differently than if they were going to be regular stick-built homes right on that lot. If there was a development coming before the town. In other words, I don't think they should be paying extra permits or fees or anything like that than any other developer would pay to have something put in.
Other developers do pay
Okay, well,
fees.
then it should be,
That's,
everything should be standard is what I'm saying.
okay, thank you. That's clarified. Thank you. Rick?
Yeah, so I think if I read all this documentation correctly, and I read it before I came yesterday, and the purpose of us having this before us tonight is just to give the public an opportunity to voice their concerns. And then this is going back to the ordinance committee and to be reviewed, and then to the town council to be approved. So I'm glad you guys came and you know, you had some very good points. But I don't think that we're going to address, it's not a task to address, I mean, according to Jay's notes, we're just approving the movement of these performance standards from chapter 500 to chapter 405. And yeah, so we're not approving, you know, we're not approving this or disapproving this tonight. We're just saying that we're okay with taking this ordinance out of chapter 500 and putting it into 405, and then having the town council and the ordinance committee look at it again. Is that fair, Madam Chair?
That's fair, and that's why performance standards very particularly come to us. But it was thought that it would be better to get everything in one chapter rather than scattered. And then there were changes. I noted a couple of things that folks on the ordinance committee and the town council might take a look at. And that would be certainly to review questions of lot size and grandfathering options, given that older units might have been on smaller lots. And that it's a case of when you have a development that's existed for many, many years, there are going to be some things that are just kind of in effect out of whack with the new ordinance. So the concept of grandfathering should be in there where it's appropriate. And let's see what else I have. Yeah, the lot size, given that some of the earlier facilities were a lot smaller, and that there was not a question of a grid when this particular development began. Again, that goes to a question of grandfathering. However, brand new developments, new ones coming before us, the grid form actually conforms with what we ask for in a lot of our design standards, and that is a grid form, block form. So for new facilities, for new developments, I particularly don't see a problem with the grid form. I do see a problem with the older developments that have grown up and have the curves and have different lot sizes because they've basically been there a long time and changed over the years. So that would be my suggestion to the town council and the ordinance committee to take a look at appropriate issues of grandfathering in recognition of some of these developments that have been there and for which this would be a problem. But I see no issue with moving the material from out of chapter 500 and into the zoning ordinance chapter 405. That and taking a look at performance standards, which would come before us, would basically our responsibility tonight, and listening to what the folks had to say. I do not believe we need a motion. We do not.
Before the motion, I just have one last. I think Eric could address the grandfathering. I believe that the way it works is when there's a new ordinance, or you can address it, but when there is a new ordinance, anything that's already built is grandfathered. Is that accurate? Oh, there's a lawyer man over there.
Yeah.
We could ask the lawyer man. That's what we pay him for.
Yes, that's right. So the way technically it's called non-conformance. So it's legally non-conforming. Any lot or property that's made non-conforming by the adoption of a zoning ordinance is quote unquote grandfathered, or the official term is legally non-conforming. I would say, however, things are not changing. So this just again, we just moved these over from the existing ordinance after staff reviewed it, the ordinance committee reviewed it. It's not changing anything. For example, I'm looking at it right now, it already has a space of 30 by 70. So that's a minimum of 2,100 square feet. That's already in your current ordinance. So this would not be changing anything that's already there today.
Thank you, Phil. Yeah, Roger?
I'm just kind of curious, when the ordinance committee was meeting, were you aware that this was being discussed?
Yes, I'll take that too, because so we had a meeting with the DeFoss family together with the town manager and myself and Attorney Beagles. We've met personally. They've presented some changes. The council has accepted some, not others. There's been many public meetings at the ordinance committee level at this point.
Thank you, Phil. All set. All right, thank you. Moving on to the next item.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. The planning board will conduct a public hearing to receive comment on amendments to the official zoning ordinance to modify section 6 definitions to include language regarding workforce housing. Eric?
Thank you. So as Rachel said, the town is conducting a public hearing to receive comments on adding a definition to the zoning ordinance, section 6, which covers definitions for workforce housing. This change really stems from the town council creating a category for workforce housing in the growth management ordinance and needing to define that in the town zoning ordinance accordingly. The definition was workshopped and approved by the Housing Alliance, who moved it to the council in early May. The council then had a workshop and I believe first reading of it a few weeks ago and subsequently sent it to the planning board for review. So similarly to the last hearing that we had, the board should now hold the hearing, weigh in on the provided definition, and then give any of their feedback to the council for a second reading and another hearing before the ordinance is eventually updated. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. The meeting is now open to public comment. If anyone has a comment, anyone in the room, please approach the podium, give your name and address.
Hi, my name's Marvin Gates, 423 Black Point Road. I made a very similar comment during the first reading at council. And it is only the very first sentence that defines it. Workforce housing means decent, safe, and sanitary living. I may be betraying some generational understanding of words, so to speak, but safe and sanitary, I understand and I can immediately visualize. Decent sounds very much more subjective, but as I said, it would be as though one of the words was awesome or something like that is what I take decent to be. I know you can't respond to me, but I'd very much like to see more definition to the meaning of decent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to make a comment? Angela, do we have anyone online? All right, thank you. This is open to the planning board. Karen?
Sure. So for my own understanding, workforce housing, is there a difference between workforce housing and affordable housing? Or is this just another term?
This is what the definition, this is all a definition of what workforce housing
Okay.
means.
I just didn't know if it was mirroring that of affordable housing or if it was different. I was unclear.
So Karen, just to, I know the definition of affordable housing in the zoning ordinance talks about certain percentages of the area median income. And I believe this definition is more geared towards having housing costs being with the industry kind of general standard of 30% or less of the income of the family. So they define it a little bit differently, but to Rachel's point, that's certainly how this is working.
Sure. Okay. Again, still figuring out our role in all this, but what I was thinking in the last public hearing that we had, and what I think is this is, I always wonder what other towns are doing and what they use for their verbiage. So, when we have when someone from the public is saying, define decent, are other towns using workforce housing? Do they use words like decent? Are they using other words maybe that they might be able to find that might be more appropriate? Otherwise, I'm sure they spent a lot of time on this in the particulars.
All right, Eric, could you respond to Karen's question about how or if other town ordinances are consulted and how you get, or how the planning board, not the planning board, but the planning staff or the council, the ordinance committee gets to the use of terms such as decent?
I guess I can't really speak to the specifics. This was done with council and the town manager's office, so I'm certainly happy to follow up with them and procure an answer for that, but I don't have an answer at this time.
All right, thank you. Roger?
Yeah, I guess this is maybe directed to Eric, is, kind of piggybacking on what Karen was saying. Is this a movement beyond just this town where there's an effort to maybe get away from the term affordable housing and using workforce housing to reduce any kind of stigma that might be associated with affordable housing?
I'm not sure if it's necessarily intended to address any stigmas. But again, that would be something that I could certainly get from the manager and maybe speaking with some of the folks who worked on it with the Housing Alliance and the council. Yep.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Karen Martin is in the audience that I know works with the Long Range Planning Committee and has been part of maybe these conversations. It might be able to shed some light.
Karen, would you approach?
Hi, Karen Martin with the Scarborough Economic Development Corporation. I've not been a part directly of putting together these definitions, but what this was an attempt to do, I believe, was to separate affordable housing, which has a lower definition, a lower income requirement, and the workforce housing is something that is intended to be a different income level. So it's intended to be for, all of the folks who are, really working in the community. They don't meet the affordable housing requirements, but it's an attempt to define what we mean by workforce housing, because it's been thrown around a lot. I don't know that every town has a definition of workforce housing. Affordable housing is always very clear, but the workforce housing is a little bit different. But again, it's a different category, different income level.
Karen, is affordable housing usually Section 8, or is there a wider possibility?
I think it's defined really by, isn't it? I think it's 80%, but this is where I'm not a housing person. So I'm not sure, but I think that was really the income bracket. But I think, like Eric said, we can get back to you on that. But I did just want to say that it was two different things. Workforce housing and affordable housing are distinct.
Thank you. Roger.
Karen, while you're up there. So is the idea here that right now, for instance, we try and have a certain percentage of affordable housing in our developments? Is this going to be another category that we may ultimately decide that we want developers to do, like another, say, 10% for workforce housing?
So I haven't heard discussion of that in my limited contact on this particular issue. I think it's been about acknowledging that we have some very expensive rentals in this community, and maybe we want to look at what the, I don't want to say lower end of the spectrum, but a reasonable income that someone fresh out of college or someone working in the stores and retail areas here. So again, I don't think I have the knowledge of what is intended to do with the workforce housing. But at this point, I don't think they're looking at doing any percentages or anything like that. I think it's just really an acknowledgement that there are many different levels of housing that we need.
Thank you. I will point to what's been going on recently, and that is there's been quite a lot of talk about affordable housing and workforce housing over the past year. And the state of Maine has been looking at providing money for developers who want to put in both affordable and workforce housing. We don't have a definition of workforce housing. If somebody were to come before us, a developer, to say, hi, we're working with the state, we want to put in some workforce housing, without an ordinance and without a definition, we wouldn't know what we were dealing with when somebody came before us. So if somebody came before the planning board and said, we're going to put in workforce housing, this is what it's going to look like, we wouldn't know what that meant. At least with this part of the ordinance, we now know what the income levels are and who might be affected by them and who might be able to finally find a place in Scarborough to rent. So that's what this ordinance is designed to do. There are definitions of workforce housing, of affordable housing. I don't know what they are, but we now know what workforce housing is if this is passed. Anyone else? No? Thank you very much. And this discussion goes back to the town council. Next item, the planning board will conduct a public hearing. Tonight is the night. Folks, you came here for the hearings. And we'll conduct a public hearing to receive comment on proposed amendments to the official zoning map to modify the boundaries of the R2 zoning district in the Highland Avenue area. This change would apply to Assessor's Map R80, lots 12, 13, 15, 15A, 23A, and 24. Eric?
Thank you. So this change in the official zoning map of the town, as Rachel had mentioned, would apply to 6 lots on Highland Avenue. This request stems from a property owner request, which has been supported by all other lot owners affected. The change would allow for existing non-conforming lots to comply with the newly established R2 zoning district standards, as well as permit future lot splits or subdivisions for owners who no longer need 2 acres per lot, as is required in the RF zone. The applicants indicated that 3 existing parcels are set up to allow for future residential development if the zone change is enacted. These changes have been reviewed by the Long Range Planning Committee at request of town leadership, and then reviewed by town council for a first reading back in May. At that point, similar to the previous public hearings, the council referred those to the planning board. And now the board's responsibility is to hold the hearing and weigh in on the proposed changes. And with that, I will turn it back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Before we begin, could you clarify whether this is for residential only or whether apartment buildings would be allowed on this property, on these affected lots?
So the uses in the R2 zone for residential uses are limited to single family. So it would not have any impact with respect to multifamily.
Thank you. If there is anybody, well, if there's anybody in the room, stand in back of him and please name and address. And you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Ms. Chairman. My name is Jim Fisher with Northeast Civil Solutions. We're here this evening representing Mr. Fowler in this particular request. As Eric mentions, we're just here for an advisory opinion from the planning board. We've been working on this project for about 3 years before COVID kind of interjected itself. So we're back. Staff has been exceptionally helpful over the past couple of years in working with us. And we did go to the Long Range Planning Committee in April. They recommended unanimously that we go ahead and approve this. We went to council for the first reading, as Eric mentioned, last month. They also recommended it. And then they're sending it to the planning board for the advisory opinion, then before it goes back to the council. Essentially, what we're looking at is a kind of a bookended, small, very narrow portion of property off of Highland Avenue. You'll see on the plan ahead or behind you or above you, behind these lots is the railway line. So you've got the Highland Avenue at the front portion of it. And then each of these lots is about 100+ feet deep until you get to the curve, and then they get a little bit deeper. And then there's the active rail line behind them. On either end of this area, that which is in the lighter shaded green on your screen, is the R2 zone. Excuse me. For whatever reason, the powers that be, well over a decade ago, made the zone incorporate this little narrow strip of 6 lots with the RF zone, which isn't the majority of the properties that are across the street, across Highland Avenue. But the other parcels that are on this side of Highland Avenue on both ends of this area are R2. Go figure. That's when we went back to the Long Range Planning Committee and they said, yeah, it really shouldn't have been that way. But there's obviously a process to be able to go through and get that shifted. So we're here this evening to be able to address any questions or comments that you might have regarding our request to be able to have these 6 lots, 3 of which are potentially further divisible, all of which are currently improved. None of them are vacant. And they are more lawn areas right now, but there could be 3 of the lots could actually have a split because, as you're probably aware, the RF requires 2 acres, the R2 requires half an acre. So that's essentially what we're looking at. And given that, we'd be happy to address any questions or comments that you have in conjunction with the public hearing.
Thank you. This is now an item for public hearing. If you are in the room and you have a comment, please approach the microphone and give your name and address.
Hello, my name is Nina McKee, 309 Black Point Road. And I know in the ordinance, it does say that if land abutting other lands that are different zones can be incorporated in the larger zone. And it sounds like this is really a done deal, but I'm up here to just plead for the trees in the forest as you drive from down Highland Avenue from the fire station to South Portland. It's just so lovely. so lovely to have trees and no houses. And that's the land that's kind of not around much anymore. So I know this is kind of a plea into the night, but I just want to plead for the trees. So thank you.
Thank you, Nina. Is there anyone else in the audience? Do we have anyone online? All right. Public comment is over. Turn this over to members of the planning board. Raise your hand if you have a comment or question. Rick.
So a couple of things. I'm assuming that this was already zoned RF since it's the same color as the RF. And is currently owned RF based on the literature in front of me. So I'm assuming these are all 2-acre parcels now.
No, not all of them. Most of these parcels existed before there was any zoning.
Okay, so that's hence the allow for the non-conforming lots to comply with the new R2 zone.
That's correct.
So these were built prior to that being an RF zone, I guess is what you're
Yes, before there was basically any zoning.
Okay.
The lots were created. The houses weren't necessarily built on the lots at that time.
saying. So the lots were subdivided prior to it being an RF zone.
Yes,
Okay. But it now is in the RF zone.
that's correct.
I don't have a problem with the houses being in the RF zone and even though they're not 2-acre lots. But I do have a problem with rezoning this to make it so that we can subdivide some. I don't understand the zoning amendment will allow for the best use and yield. If I owned one of these other RF zones that's on here, these other 300 lots or whatever it is, if they get rezoned, I'd want to be rezoned. And I'd want to put 3 or 4 more houses on my lot. So that's just not fair. Either we rezone the whole thing and then rezone the whole town. I don't see rezoning for the purpose of so people can subdivide their lots. Doesn't make sense to me. If they wanted to subdivide their lots, they should have bought 4 acres in an RF zone and then they could subdivide 2 acres off. So I don't see the purpose of this. They're non-conforming. They were built. The town's not saying that they can't be non-conforming since they were built before it was an RF zone. But I see no benefit to the town or the people in that area or the rest of these folks here in this RF zone to changing that zoning. I don't see how it benefits anybody other than those folks that are living there and they're already benefiting from being non-conforming. So I don't know if any of you folks in the room, I feel bad for you. I'm sorry, but that's just, I'm not inclined to support this. That's all.
I do have one piece of background since I attended the Long Range Planning Committee meeting. And that is one of the things that began this is one of the property owners on one of the larger lots wanted to be able to subdivide so one of his children could live in Scarborough by building a house next to him. So that's what then raised the issue of why is all of a sudden this part, just a small part, in a different zone. So that's simple background. That's what the impetus for this was. The other people in the, I guess the RF zone did not come and make any requests. This gentleman did.
I'm sure a lot of people would like to subdivide their lot and allow their children to live on it. If that's the case, I mean, there are things like ancillary buildings and other things that the town allows to help folks out like that. But to be able to subdivide a lot and sell off that part of your lot, and I understand they're saying it's for their kids, and that's that's great. I'm glad to see people trying to help their kids, but it's not fair to everybody else in the R zone. And I can tell you right now, if we're changing zoning, I'm gonna be the next one in line, and I'm gonna reference this, and I know we're not a precedent-setting board, but in a way, we have to be. If it's fair for the people on Highland Ave, then it's fair for the people on Black Point Road, and it's fair for I know we're not a precedent-setting board, so we don't have to allow everybody to do things just because we allow one person to do things. But we should allow everybody to do things if we allow one person to do things. That's always been my thought. So
Rick, I agree, we're not a precedent-setting board, and we are not actually making a decision on this. We haven't been asked to make a decision. It's the town council that makes the decision, and whether something is a precedent or not would be fought out at a higher level than us.
okay, that makes sense to me. My input when we send this to the town council would be that I'm adamantly not in favor of it.
All right, thank you. Roger.
I will respectfully disagree with my colleague. I'm familiar with this area, and I assume that the homeowners in the RF zone on the east side of Highland Avenue received notification of this zone change request.
Yeah, yep.
Okay, and have we heard from any of them?
I don't believe so. I've had some other comments from people further down Highland Avenue. I'm just kind of wondering where exactly this was, and we've clarified that, but beyond that, I don't think we've really received much more comment.
Okay, the homes that are in the RF zone right now to the east of Highland, those are very upscale homes, very upscale homes. The homes that have been built along Highland Avenue from where Chamberlain, and Highland, down to, I guess, where they've stopped. Those are more modest, more, I would say, almost like workforce type housing. The coin of phrase. And I suspect that this is probably more economics than anything else, because in fact, when they started putting homes in on that side, on the west side of Highland Avenue with the railroad tracks right behind them, I was surprised that they would put homes there. And I was surprised when people purchased the homes, and they've actually made them into nice homes. So I would be in favor of this, and because there's nobody, I don't see anybody who would be building a home on the east side similar to those homes, building a home on the west side of Highland on these lots. It's just, it would be not compatible with anything else along that strip right there. So I have no problem with this.
Thank you. Karen?
Sure. I just was looking at the letter that it looks like that that was the neighbor signed. And I think, at first I was like, this sounds okay, but I think Rick made a lot of really good points. And I feel like we could open ourselves up to a lot of issues. What sort of concerns me is that the letter that all the neighbors signed, in my mind, is a little vague. I don't know if it was actually represented to them that they're aware that 3 of the lots might be split, and that they might actually end up with a new neighbor or a house closer to them. And they might not have been fully informed of kind of what that shift meant. So when I look at this letter signed by all the abutters, I'm wondering, do they actually really understand what this change is? Do they understand that their house that was an acre away might actually have a new home next to them there? In one sense, it makes sense, but it just seems really like a very small change seems like the benefit of one person, where I'm not quite sure what our role is, where one person really, or just a couple of people really seem to want to make a change so they could possibly develop and split. Those are things that I take away from.
Thank you. Chad?
I guess I am in favor of moving it forward, but it is a little questionable with regards to nuisance around the noise around the train and safety around the train to me.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I have one
Uh,
more second?
Yes, I was going to call upon you. I saw you pop up there, Jim. Go ahead.
I will.
I'm sorry, I
modif-
thought I was hearing
I
from
will
Jim.
modify
Go
my,
ahead.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Rick. Go ahead.
I will modify my stance somewhat in that if we send this to town council with the motion to approve, I guess we'll say, if we do this for them, we do this for everybody. Next time I see something like this again, I will allow it again. If I'm going to allow it for the folks on Highland Ave, I'm going to allow it for everybody in Scarborough, because that's fair. We got to be fair. I mean, we just have to be. So I understand why they want to do this. I would love to split my lot into 3 or 4 pieces and start selling them. And if I was zoned differently, I could. So if we're going to change their zoning, I understand why they want to do it. I think some of them have different reasons than others. Maybe they all have the same reason, but only 3 of them are splitting off lots. So, yeah, as long as the town council realizes that if we need to be a fair board, even if we're not precedent setting. That's all I have.
Thank you. Jim, I'm going to ask Roger.
Yeah, I would just mention to Rick that we've actually done something like this before. We recently did it at Oak Hill. We changed some of the zoning lines to make them more, consistent with each other. I recall we also did it a couple of years ago down at Dunstan. We rezoned some lines down there. And if you recall, we had a development out on Beach Ridge or Mitchell Hill or something like that a few years ago. And they were going to put in like 9 or 10 homes right along the road, and everything else was RF. And so we've actually done this before, so.
And go ahead.
Yeah, the chair is going to gently tap. This is an interesting discussion, but Eric, did you have one final thing to say? And then I'm going to ask Jim to finish up
Yeah, sure. So I mean,
after I have to say.
yeah, I guess the staff, if someone comes to us and says, I want to do this with my property, do that, we try to work with them through whatever means we can to try and accommodate that. And each request is certainly reviewed at the staff level and, fleshed out at the, long range planning committee, ordinance committee, whatever groups might need to be, consulted in that. And, obviously if we get a proposal to change a lot in the middle of the RF to an industrial, use so they can use it for a sludge dump or something like that, then I think we'd certainly vet that a lot differently than, something like we're seeing tonight. So every property owner that we work with, we certainly vet, the different options that they might have and guide them through the appropriate processes. So, well, I certainly appreciate the precedent setting that you had mentioned, Rick. I mean, we certainly work with property owners however we can to make sure that the town's ordinances are still maintained and that we're in compliance with our comp plan and everything like that. So there is a process and we're going through it now.
As the original letter to the Long Range Planning Committee states, the section of Highland Avenue requesting a zoning amendment is the only portion of the north side of the road that is not zoned R2. The history keeper of the planning board, Roger Beely, has said, we have done this before in order to harmonize zoning lines. And from my perspective, that's what we're doing this time. I think we have to keep where my intent would be to take every application on its own, on its face value. Knowing a history might be interesting and might be important and provide some education, but each application stands on its own. In this case, the request is to harmonize the zoning with the abutting zoning on the, what is it, the north side of Highland Avenue. And I say no problem with that. Jim?
Thank you, Ms. Chairman. One of the few responses I'd like to be able to make is that relative to the previous projects that were just before you this evening regarding workforce housing, this project is basically ideal to be able to make this happen in term, and I don't want to get hung up on the word workforce housing, but Eric pretty much hit the nail on the head where we said that, if we were looking for a contract zone or something like that in the middle of an RFC, in the middle of any zone for that matter, it wouldn't necessarily fly like we accepted this one to be able to present to the Long Range Planning Committee, to the Planning Board, and to the Council. Essentially, developers' lot costs are fairly substantial. Road costs are exorbitant nowadays, labor costs being what they are, et cetera. This project, standing on its own, is perfect for what it's intended to do. And that is to provide workforce housing, not necessarily low-income housing, but it's between a relatively narrow strip of property between a reasonably busy road, but not that busy, Highland Avenue, and an active rail line, as opposed to the much larger lots and houses that are across the street and elsewhere in the RF zone. So as far as developers' costs are concerned, splitting a few of these lots basically would have no infrastructure costs. The infrastructure is already there. The utilities are already there, notwithstanding running new utilities to a new building. This is ideal to be able to expand, albeit slightly, a few lots that would be basically gauged as workforce housing in the town. And toward that end, it just makes a lot of sense, as Rachel mentioned, that the Long Range Planning Committee had pointed out that this is the only area that is, for whatever reason, that's on this particular side of Highland that wasn't already zoned R2. So it makes a lot of sense, given the improvements that are already on these lots, and every lot is improved, to be able to split a couple of them to the extent that the people who are living there would like to be able to do that. Mr. Fowler is one of them, to be sure. And then to allow somewhat smaller lots, not incredibly small by any means, to be able to create a house that is very nice, either a starter home or a retirement home or a workforce home. So toward that end, it works rather well. We did, to Ms. Shoup's comments, this is actually the second time around we met with the owners of the properties that are in this particular area, all of whom, and explained what was going on and what could happen there. Not that it would, but it could. Doesn't affect half of them, but all of them were on board. This is a nice, actually, little neighborhood. They all know each other. And they basically said yes, and then they re-signed that was several years ago, and then again COVID came in, and just to be able to bring things up to speed, they re-signed it again late this past year. So toward that end, everybody is aware of what can happen or what could happen out there. And then again, as far as the overall benefits to the town is concerned, I think this is, while it's not precedent setting, we've turned down many projects that are off the cuff to the point where we don't either believe in them or we don't think that they're going to go anywhere. This was not one of them. This seemed to be able to stand on its own relatively easily, hence we are where we are. Thank you.
Thank you. No other comments? Eric, do you have enough to write up the?
Yes, we will. Well, actually, for all three of these public hearings, we will work to write up the minutes and then send those on to the clerk and the manager's office so they can forward that to council.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Hearing is over. The next item, item number 8, the Sprague Corporation is requesting an advisory opinion on a miscellaneous appeal to the Zoning Board of Appeals to use an existing grass sod parking area as off-street parking for Scarborough Beach State Park. The property is further identified as 395 Black Point Road, Assessors Map R 103, Lot 17. Eric.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this property on Black Point Road has been used for quite some time as accessory parking to Scarborough Beach. And it was brought up to the town that this was occurring, and since this is parking for a use that is not on the same parcel as the use itself, that being the beach property, Under the town zoning ordinance, this would have to go through the zoning board of appeals. The zoning ordinance actually specifies that any miscellaneous appeal application before it's heard by the zoning board of appeals needs to come before the planning board for an advisory opinion. So the applicant has come before the board to request that advisory opinion on the miscellaneous appeal. So now the planning board's job is to discuss the project and make any recommendations to the zoning board before they make a decision on the appeal. And then this would have to come back to the planning board for a site plan approval. So there's a lot of details we can deal with at that point, but our responsibility is now to give a preliminary advisory opinion to the ZBA. Madam Chair.
Thank you. Is there anybody here from the Sprague Corporation?
My name's Greg Wolfert. I live at 409 Black Point Road. I am a business partner with the Sprague Corporation with Black Point Resource Management, and I run Scarborough Beach State Park, and they asked me to come tonight.
Since this is a public hearing, I will offer you the first opportunity to speak.
So what we proposed this back in 2020, but COVID came in and we withdrew it. We had already gone, met, and we were moving ahead with it, and we backed out of it because of the COVID situation. And really within accordance with the issues with the state and all their state parks at the time of COVID, it was also to reduce parking in your state parks to make it so that there were less people together during the COVID situation. So that's why we withdrew. Because if not, if we had gone ahead, we had to reduce parking, and that reduced parking because we weren't going to have that lot. So now we've come back because we see we had, and there are some facts that you've got from the P&A Association that are wrong, but we had for years, and I've been there a long time. So the Harmon's lot across the street was a 128 car parking lot. We also had the Grays at 160. So what would happen is we'd fill up the Harmon's, then we'd go through an adjoining piece of property of Harmon and Grays and park the 160 cars there. The Harmons, I think it's 4 years ago now, asked us because they had sold their house to their daughter and they have little kids, and I can see their concern. They were worried about traffic going in, and so was I about their kids. So they declined to keep it going. Howard Gray wanted to keep it going. So we used an entrance that we had used back in the 70s and 80s, which was through Howard's Road. And we continued to use his, and then we were using the Sprague lot as an overflow to make up for the 128 we lost. There is a need for it. There's a lot of people that want to go to the beach. Another thing, it was pointed out that we've expanded our parking. We haven't. What we did is in the park itself, we changed how the cars were parked. We haven't gone any wider or longer. We just changed how the cars were parked from, we'll say, vertical to horizontal. And so we ended up getting another 35 spaces, which did help a little, but doesn't help much because Scarborough Beach State Park is very popular and a lot of people, a lot of Scarborough residents especially want to use it. So that's why we've come. We just feel that we want to keep it as a grass lot. We don't want to change that at all. We want to also make sure that that we can keep the traffic flow down with the police department, with their, I'd say, I won't say it's a blessing, but how we stack the cars up in the morning and get them in. We keep the road fairly clear. We keep people out there to make sure that we can do that. So we try to help the town and the residents out that way.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I should point out that in the planning board packet and materials that went out, there is the February 2020 review by the Zoning Board of Appeals, signed by the chair, Karen Shoup, that makes some recommendations. And I suggest the planning board take a look at that. Is there any member of the public that would like to speak?
Good evening, Chair Henderson, members of the planning board. My name is Matt Manahan. I represent the Prouts Neck Improvement Association. I did send a letter to the Board of Appeals, which I copied this board on, and I assume you all have that letter. If you don't, I brought copies, but so if anyone needs it, let me know. I'm not going to go into that letter. You have it before you. A lot of it is detail you don't need. It's mostly for the Board of Appeals. But we just wanted to say our association supports this application. We believe that off-street parking is a good thing. The one thing that we want to do, and Ms. Shute remembers this from a couple of years ago, one issue was, should parking be limited to the 114 spaces? And we believe that it should. Although we support this application, we're going to request that the Board of Appeals accept the proposal essentially as it was in 2020, which is to have 114 additional spaces, to have a grass lot, to have no artificial lighting, to keep it as natural as possible. We believe the 114 spaces is important for the public experience, but also the limit to protect the natural resources in the area. And there are quite a few. This park is in the Resource Protection District, and there's a reason for that. And our members feel strongly about that. Obviously, our members feel strongly about traffic safety because they pass by this every time they go to or from their houses as well. But we think that it's important for you, and we're asking you tonight to actually make that recommendation, because the Board of Appeals is coming to you for a recommendation as to what they should do. They can accept it or not, but we think that, and one thing that I wrote in this letter is that the standards that the Board of Appeals must apply, and there aren't many standards, frankly, it's pretty vague, but the standards essentially are that the parking has to be, one, required, and by required, that means required by the zoning ordinance. Two, that required parking cannot reasonably be provided on the primary lot, in this case, the state park lot. And three, it has to meet the requirements of conditions of Section 11, which has to do with parking. And it's important to understand that there is no provision in the zoning ordinance that specifically says, here's how many parking spots you should have for a state park use. And so what Section 11 says about that is the planning board is supposed to then decide what's the required parking for uses that are not listed specifically in the table with spaces. And so we think it's appropriate now, and we know this is going to come back before you for site plan review. We get that. But in order for the Board of Appeals to make its decision, it needs to know what's the required number of parking spaces so that it can then decide whether the primary lot can reasonably meet that number. We don't think it can. We think the number of spaces on there is not sufficient. We agree with Sprague about that. But then how many spaces are required off-site that can't be reasonably accommodated? We believe the number is 114. And we think that's an appropriate number. And so if you were to make a recommendation, when you make a recommendation tonight to the Board of Appeals, we think that you should recognize that that's what the applicant is asking for. That's what we support. That's what we think you should support. Obviously, the Board of Appeals can take it or leave it. They can decide for themselves. But that's our request to you, to actually limit it to 114 spaces, limit it to grass lot, no artificial lighting. And with that, we would support this request. We think it's good for the town. We think it's good for the area. We think it's good for the environment. We think it's good for park users. So that's all we have to say. And we'll just add one thing, which is the president of PNIA is on the webpage. He may have him and others may have comments as well. Jeremy Winterstein is the president, but I'm speaking as the legal representative for PNIA. Thank you.
Thank you. Other members of the public?
We do have some online.
Okay. To promote somebody and,
Yep, Mr. Winterstein, I'm gonna promote you, so you'll be able to speak. I think if you just unmute.
Hello, can you hear me? Hi, thank you. My name is Jeremy Winterstein, and I am president of the Prospect Improvement Association. And I live at 22 Winslow Homer Road, and I'm not a full-time Scarborough resident, but that's where our family's home is. And thank you very much for hearing this, and thank you for considering this. As Matt said, we are in support of the applicant's proposal, and we believe the Scarborough Beach State Park needs more parking, and this is what the applicant has asked for. And we believe that 114 spaces is reasonable, and we hope that you will forward that request to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and that it also remain as a grass, unlit, simple, rustic parking lot. So we think this is a win for the park users, a win for the neighborhood, a win for the park, and a win for the landowner. So hope that you will consider that, and thank you for your time.
thank you. Do you have somebody else? No. At some point, we may have additional questions, but I'm going to close the hearing and turn this over to the board. Let me remind the board that really the only thing we're being asked to do tonight is to make a decision on whether there should be a parking lot, whether that should be used as a parking lot. We are not to make a decision tonight on the number of spaces. At some point, that comes back to us for site plan, and we take a look at the number of spaces that would be allowable there, whether it be grass or gravel, what sort of fence there might be, what the traffic might be, what the safety might be of pedestrians, any lighting. In other words, what comes back to us is a lot with a specified purpose, and we handle the full site review. So we have a limited responsibility tonight. We can make recommendations if we wish, but please do not get into a match on how many parking spaces should be there. That is not before us tonight. Thank you. Now, saying that, Roger?
Not to disagree with you on this, but I'm kind of.
Has it stopped you before? Go ahead.
I'm kind of curious why Mr. Manahan, he mentioned that before it goes to the Board of Appeals, there has to be a finite number of parking spaces coming from this board.
That does not. That is his opinion.
I could tell you that at our meeting in 2020, there were safety concerns, and we had a lot of conversations about that. And so, I mean, I don't want to,
No.
and that's why. I can elaborate if you want. I don't want to interrupt you.
Go ahead. Who we got? Rick, go ahead.
Sure. I think our purpose here tonight isn't necessarily to discuss it at this point, because as Rachel pointed out, when it comes back for site plan review, we're going to go all through that, Roger, I'm sure. So,
No, I understand that.
no, I don't, yeah,
My only concern is there a procedural, is this a procedural requirement? That's all.
Oh, right.
That's all. That's all I was.
I don't believe so.
I have no issues with this project. I like it. So, oh, I'm not supposed to say that. I'm in favor of it. Say that.
We make comments to this is an advisory opinion. Who gets this one? To the Zoning Board of Appeals. Tonight is the night for opinions.
Oh.
So if your opinion is, and your advice is that this is something that's acceptable, should go through.
My advice is that it's acceptable and it should go through.
Thank you very much. Roger, yes?
Yeah, as somebody who uses that beach, absolutely.
Chad?
Yeah, this seems to be a reasonable request.
Karen, can I quote you? Let me quote you. You can say something now and then I'm going to quote you. So go ahead.
Sure. No, I would give this a positive review and advisory. I think, again, I think the zoning board, and I can appreciate why the people here hammering the 114 because some of the criteria that the zoning board is looking at is in regards to safety. And when you came before us 2 years ago, they were like, we're taking away 100 to 300 spots and we're only replacing it with 114. That's why the zoning board was hemming and hawing over the numbers. I think they should pass this through and then when we come back to site review, that's exactly the side of things that we talk about.
Thank you. I will quote Karen Shoup from the 2020 opinion. One of the recommendations is to allow the use of the parking at 395 Black Point Road for use by the Scarborough Beach State Park to accommodate overflow parking during peak periods of beach use. Also included in the approval was a recommendation to the planning board that they study the effects of pedestrian traffic, local traffic, as well as visitor traffic in that area to see if any additional requirements need to be put in place from a traffic and safety standpoint and to determine the appropriate number of parking spaces. I think that is my advice to the Zoning Board of Appeals is that that is a very appropriate recommendation to make to the planning board, and we would look forward to it coming to us. Any other comments? Thank you. This is done. Next, Sonashine Realty LLC requests a site plan amendment review for conversion of a temporary parking area to permanent status, landscaping revisions, addition of fencing on site, and pedestrian circulation at Portland Volvo. The property is further identified as 9 US Route 1, Assessors Map U50, Lot 18. Eric.
Thank you. So Rachel summarized this project pretty well. It comes to us from Portland Volvo, who we've been working with over the past few months to make sure that they were in compliance with their previously approved site plan. Part of those discussions yielded this current rendition of the site plan that is aiming to address concerns from abutters in a residential area. We know that there will be an addition of fencing on site and then some edits to the parking area, as well as some lighting improvements to reduce the overflow onto neighboring lots, especially off business hours. And with that, I would turn it back to the board.
Thank you. Angela, did you have any issues around stormwater?
I guess I just wanted to chime in. I know there was some confusion around, I think the Woodard and Kern memo, if you've read that, and what is actually porous pavement on the site and what is not. I think the site is a little more complicated because they went through planning board approval and amendment, however, built something different. And so not really clear what was actually built. I think that was the confusion by the Woodard and Kern memo is I think our peer reviewers actually don't know what's actually on the site today, which isn't the existing or proposed condition. And then maybe that's where some clarification should maybe come from the applicant. And then as far as staff comments go, there is comments about stormwater. And I know we've talked about it with the applicant previously, is looking at, again, this site a little more complicated because it was not only a redevelopment site to start, it went through different modifications. And so it's really important, I think, to step back and look at it in a holistic approach to what was there previously to where we're heading, which I think Sebago has done a good job about trying to figure out the stormwater pieces in general. However, I still have some concerns about going back to the redevelopment piece, the original concept, the original approval, I will say, this planning board approved, also included some treatment of existing impervious area to weigh out areas of new impervious you're following me, on the opposite side of the site. It was kind of balancing the site in general. So if there's areas they couldn't capture, they were doing something for areas they could capture, even though they weren't touching. And that's the north parking lot. And so the new proposal has an elimination of what was some treatment of runoff, which is no longer there. So that was staff's comment, was looking at that piece. And I think the Woodard and Kern piece was more focused around not quite knowing what was actually on the site today, and the constructability around the porous pavement. So those are the two. And I'm happy to, as we go through and once some clarification, if there's any way I can help with that, I'm more than happy to.
Thank you. For the developer.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Kylie Mason. I'm hoping this is the last time you see me on this project. But I'm here with Sebago Technics. In the audience, we have Bill Waldron of Portland Volvo and Chris Taylor of Sebago Technics, and he can answer the stormwater components. It's probably best that I do not. So really quickly, the things I can tell you about this actually, Eric did a great job of describing it. It's actually not an update to a neighbor complaint. The section of fence that we've added is actually on the right side. So if you're in Route 1 facing the street, they've added a section of fencing for additional screening. And that was to displace some landscaping that was proposed in the last approval. So we've added that section of fencing simply for additional screening. The fencing on the left side next to the neighbor who experienced some noise early on was added in the previous approval and still carries over to this one. And that is part of what they want to construct. It was the part that didn't get built after the last approval. So just a point of clarification. One of the items that came up also was a note of the house side shields. They actually are in the packet on the photometrics plan. The key thing being they're noted BC at the end of the photometrics identifier. So all of the ones that are labeled BC do have the house side shields. And again, those are not installed as of yet. In terms of what's existing on the site in terms of treatment, there are a handful of parking spaces at the end. If I could grab a site plan. Can I still this? I'm going to multitask. So these spaces right here, which were proposed to be porous asphalt at the time, were constructed as regular asphalt. And that was really because of the traffic received at the doors here. Everything else that was intended to be porous was constructed as porous, with the exception of this overflow lot originally was much different. What they're proposing now is a superficial treatment here, as opposed to the porous in the new pavement area. So in terms of porous or not porous, all the other stormwater treatment areas exist. These few spaces here did not receive porous asphalt. My understanding and the calculation that Chris did was to look at the site in totality as requested to make sure that all of the treatment is meeting the standards, and that includes old and new. So, and I'll let him walk through that really quickly. Elements that we're also asking to change that are different than the prior approval and constructed are actually absorbed within the set, and it's small changes such as the elimination of an island in this location wasn't built, the modification of an island up here, and the elimination of an island here. And all of those are demonstrated within the demolition plan and then showing it forward in the site plan. So you can actually see the difference between what was approved, what wasn't constructed, and then what's proposed as the change. And I think that's largely it. What they're proposing for this site plan is to build these parking spaces out as a normal pavement section. The treatment that Angela is referring to was actually a snowmelt capture. It didn't actually have a treatment section below it, but it did have a snowmelt capture. One of the things that's changed in this plan is that they're leaving the parking lot as is, and they're committed to storing their snow storage on the parking lot. So it will flow down the parking lot and go into the stormwater treatment system as it's designed. And I'll pause there, answer any questions unless you'd like Chris to talk about stormwater next, Madam Chair.
Well, let's have your whole presentation and then we'll start with questions.
Hello, as Kylie said, my name is Chris Taylor. I work with Sebago Technics. I was the engineer for the project. And a little point of clarification on the Snowmelt system. The Snowmelt system was proposed as part of the previously approved parking expansion. It wasn't really proposed as part of the renovation and the original approval for the new dealership building itself. It was part of the past approval. And as Kylie mentioned, that the Snowmelt system was just kind of a place to put snow, plowed snow and have it melt down through some crushed stone and get into an under drain and get piped out. Now they're proposing to kind of keep that on the pavement itself and flow and kind of how it does on the site currently. Because this is the back portion of the site is an existing parking lot area. And then, as Kylie mentioned, in terms of stormwater for the porous pavement, this was as you know, there's a number of iterations that have gone through the site in terms of approvals and proposals. So the demolition plan is really the best reference, and that is referencing the original approval, showing the existing conditions as what was approved for the new dealership building. Anything that's in red is, was being taken away from that approval, shows the reduced landscape islands and the reduced porous pavement, as well as it shows kind of the demolition required to actually put in this parking expansion that is proposed. And when we did the stormwater calculations, we did, we referenced back to the redevelopment calculation that was done for the new dealership building. And so every change that we made references back to that old approval that was for this, the new dealership building before this parking expansion was considered. And I guess that I'll kind of leave it at that. If there's any other questions in terms of stormwater, feel free to ask and I can come back up.
Thank you. This item is subject to a public hearing. Is there any member of the public here tonight that would like to make a comment? Anybody online, Angela? All right, thank you. Public hearing portion is closed. I'll turn this over to the planning board. Let's start this end.
I'm the only one on this end tonight. I kept looking over there with Chad. He wasn't there. I kind of have my normal questions on this one. I kind of like to see a before and after. And I know you did a better job than, I won't slam your friend, but the gentleman who was here last time. And actually color coding some stuff. But a couple things, I don't have a great handle on. We approved a design and they didn't do the exact design for reasons that, things change. But is the only thing that changed on the design that black part, and then the things you talked about with the snow melt, we're not doing snow melt anymore, we're just leaving it on the pavement?
Correct. The only thing that's changed is, I'm gonna pull this with me, hopefully it doesn't hurt it, is this area right here. The islands generally in this area, all these islands, I think. And this changed, it was a much bigger.
All right.
This is much smaller.
I do like a before and after. So those islands that I see on that drawing weren't on the original one?
They were, they're smaller. And so if you were to turn to your plan set, the before and after is
huge.
If I could fit it all on one sheet, then, I wouldn't make much of a living. So if you were to go to the demolition plan, sheet 3.
Sheet 3. Are you talking about this sheet 3?
Yep.
Right.
right?
I don't want to take up too much time, but
So
I don't know exactly what you're looking for tonight as far as approval.
So the biggest part of the approval is essentially they didn't build what they were approved to build originally. They came back and got a new approval and realized that also was very expensive. And so they have reduced the scope to try and fit the deficiencies that they needed to address, but also still be able to complete the project for a price that they can afford. Because every day that they're waiting is actually making it more expensive. So the bulk of it is cost is driving a value return to the project in any way we can. And so there are areas that obviously weren't constructed as they should have been 2 or 3 years ago. Those have been documented as we show here. But what we tried to do was show on the demolition plan what was approved in that box that we're showing, that rectangle, the dotted box, that's what was approved. And then we're essentially asking for approval after the fact, as if it were a new project, that they're going to build the whole thing as shown here as a new project. So essentially, we could look at the history of it, or we could look at it as a correction moving forward. Correct. No, in the box on the demo plan is showing what was previously approved. And within that box, right? You can't look to the right for the expanded parking because that was much, much larger. And it wasn't ever built. And so within that box is the area of deficiencies. And so that's the area that I'm not going to be able to give a perfect explanation. I think the easiest way is to not look backwards and that by the time this approval is put in place, the site will be within the ordinance, within the approvals, within the stormwater, within the lighting, within all the requests that have been made of the abutters to make this a site we can all be proud of. That's the goal of tonight.
Okay. The stormwater.
Wait, can I just ask, I'm looking at sheet 7 of 11. Is that probably the best depiction of what you are looking for tonight? I'm trying to figure
Yes.
out what the old is and what the new is.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So I still have questions. So is the 36-inch storm drain and all this infrastructure that was underneath that, is it still underneath that?
Yes, that was existing.
Okay, so that's all still there. You
Correct.
just change your configuration of the parking area.
Correct.
Okay. I have a question for staff. So does this new stormwater plan has been peer reviewed, or are you satisfied with it, or where are we? Because obviously some things have changed a little bit. So I'm not a stormwater expert, but I know we have peer reviewers who are. So was the stormwater report in this binder peer reviewed, or are you satisfied with the stormwater and erosion control exhibit 6?
It was peer reviewed by Woodard and Kern, and that's what I was saying. They have quite a few comments. I think there was really some confusion on their part too, trying to figure it out, just similar to the board now trying to figure it out. So it might be something that could easily be clarified, but I know as of right now, Woodard and Kern's did have quite a few comments, and I don't know if Chris has looked at those. And
I don't think we've received it yet. Oh, we have? Oh, good. Hey, great. I haven't seen it yet.
And then I guess I go back to trying to, and this is where I do rely on Woodard and Kern and trying to figure out, as far as Chris mentioned about the redevelopment piece, I go back to like the demo plan that you guys were just looking at just shows kind of the north section of the site. The southern section of the site, there was some impervious area that was added that is directed at a different location. And so as you're capturing it in this area where you're showing the proposed, it's all going to the under drain soil filter. It's great. It's being treated. Like I said, I know Woodard and Kern had some questions about orifice sizes and things like that, which is great because they do. It means they're looking at it closely. it's just also looking at it, as I said, the holistic, and I do appreciate what we had talked about was that snow storage area as just being not like meeting it wasn't meeting a DEP standard or anything like that. It was a nod, I think at the time, to planning board saying, okay, we get that we're doing this other pieces on the site, and to try to offset that, we're not going to go as far as doing a whole nother underdrain soil filter and the expense of that, but here's a nod to it and looking at doing some sort of that snow storage, trying to get the sediment out of the snow, so it's not ending up right in the Nonsuch directly. So I also can appreciate now the change of trying to say where you're going to store snow, which does change things and how it drains. However, there should be other barriers, I would say, along that edge, because the fact is snow will get pushed beyond the pavement edge and that will go directly into the Nonsuch. And so while it's not, say, a requirement, I feel like we've already had the conversation with the planning board. It was kind of like, as again, saying, we'll try to accommodate as much as we can in the most practical way. And to eliminate completely, I would guess I would ask for maybe some sort of, and it could even be boulders or some sort of barrier, so you're not pushing snow essentially directly into the Nonsuch as that melts, off that parking lot. So there would be a little back and forth, I think, from staff that would be good.
Yeah, I think.
Could you wait just a minute? Angela, could you tell me what page the proposed snow storage is on?
I don't.
It's not delineated on
It's
this.
not on the.
Right, we can add a note delineating the snow storage. It's an easy enough. And I would.
Said it, that's why
Right.
I'm trying to reply because I don't think it's identified.
Right.
Right, and that was a concern I had, so appreciate knowing that I'm not going crazy looking for something that doesn't exist. Thank you.
So I would just offer, if I could, this is a stormwater permit through DEP. It is currently under review with Chris Baldwin of Cumberland County Soil Commission as well. And so again, everything has been calculated all the way back to the original approval. So any impervious that's on the left side is going to be captured within the treatment calculations. Again, developing this project as if it were a project moving forward, and it just ends up constructed the correct way at the final approval. And I think it's great. I understand the confusion. We've been experiencing it too. It's been a long road. And so we're just going to ask for your generosity and grace as we move forward with it. We've got peer reviewers. We have Cumberland County Soil Commission. DEP will have to sign off on the stormwater permit as well. So I understand it's confusing. I appreciate it. We've been looking at it for months, and obviously reviewers have been for much longer. So I really appreciate it. We can add a note for the snow storage, happy to add boulders. One thing I would offer is that the big change in this area, showing that sidewalk, that's actually the edge of the existing pavement as it exists today. And so that's actually the existing driveway that goes to that service lot to the backside. And so what we're leaving that as a pedestrian access way, which I think is a nice amenity that didn't exist in any plan prior approvals. And that green foreground is the stormwater treatment. And so I appreciate that, we don't want stormwater being plowed into the river. And of course, we can add boulders to the back of where the snow storage is going to be. But I think there's been a lot of good work to make sure that the way that parking lot exists and its grading, it doesn't drain from the parking lot back towards the river. It actually drains forward towards Route 1. And so it's draining forward. It will be collected within that basin. And I do believe it's doing its job to remove the sediments. So again, I understand that you're fatigued in seeing it. I understand it's confusing, and we do appreciate your generosity and review.
So, all right. I understand. I think I'm a little less confused now, which is good. I'll try to wrap this up real quick. Is how much parking lot did you add, like percentage wise? Was it?
It's actually reducing.
Okay.
It's actually a reduction of.
That's kind of what I thought, but
Right.
Okay. And we started talking stormwater and I.
Right, no, we're actually reducing
Okay.
impervious from the prior approval.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. And I'm okay. It's good that we reduce some of that. The islands doesn't seem to make much of a difference. I understand and can sympathize with the fact that materials and labor, everything went up, so they're trying to do what they can with what they have. But I also know that it's really hard to get a car, so, because they're selling so quick. So although costs went up, I would think that car sales are good. I guess from reading this, my notes here, it says that you're looking for a site plan amendment review. And it's kind of different in that you're asking, I believe you're asking for approval for something that's already built, which is, I understand that. I'm not saying I'm for it, against it. I'm just pointing out the fact that you're looking for approval for something that's already built, which is fine, in that as long as it was built well and there's nothing going in the river. But I don't think I would be inclined to make any decisions or approve anything tonight until we go through the stormwater a little bit more. And I understand you're gonna get a permit, DEP permit and all that stuff, but I don't feel real comfortable with it right now. So I'd like to, I know your counterparts looked at the peer review and is going to address all that. I'd feel much better after seeing that, seeing their comments addressed. But as far as what you did with that site, I've been past there a couple times and it does look nice. So I think you did a good job. That's all I have.
Thank you. And down this end. Oh, Roger, no, you go ahead.
I mean, I don't really have much to say. I think it's a very, not confusing, but you have a lot of moving pieces right here. I appreciate Angela's feedback. I honestly feel like the town has the capacity to work through them, and Portland Bobble has been there for a very long time, so I can appreciate they're trying to get back up and running. I think they made some points about the stormwater, but I feel that Angela and Eric are.
Thank you. Chad?
One thing I guess I'm curious, to what extent is the porous pavement, what remains of porous pavement now?
I guess to be built.
Well, it's indicated on one as far as it's no longer considered, but then sheet 5, it points to 2 areas, and I'm just not sure what kind of.
So all the porous pavement that's going to be installed has been installed. And so there, across the site exists many areas of, almost all the parking stalls themselves are porous asphalt, with the exception of, I think it's 5 or 6 right there that weren't constructed. This lot right here, that's to be built. So this lot right here does not exist. That lot is to be constructed, and it is a decided difference from the previous approval that had it much wider and with porous asphalt. And so what we're asking for is we're going to reduce our impervious, eliminate parking spaces, and build a much smaller parking lot that we can treat through a surficial method.
Thank you, that helps.
Thank you.
I understand Rick's concern about the stormwater and everything, but I'm inclined to, let this move forward with a condition that let the staff work with you folks on that, because I'm pretty sure if you come back and try and explain it to us again, we won't understand it. So and it's been it's been around the block here quite a few times. The only other observation I would make is when you were here last time, there was some question about, I'm looking at the site from Route 1 and the property owners there on the right. I noticed you're putting a fence in there because there's nothing there right now.
Right. The previous approval had a section of fence and then more landscaping.
Right.
And I believe after the site has been built, they actually had a conversation with that landowner and agreed that a greater extension of fence would be desirable. And instead of the landscape, it's a complete change from where we were previously.
And the one of those homeowners, if I'm not mistaken, they have like a yard light or something, I think, in their backyard. Not that it would have anything to do with you, but I mean, it shines, if I'm not
Right.
mistaken.
Part of the reason we didn't want a fence previously was from a security standpoint, that there wasn't but it does have lighting as part of the approval. The fence won't harm
Yeah.
the security of
I mean,
the,
it's a very narrow strip of land there, so the
Right.
fence makes more sense, because we were talking about some sort of landscaping. And things
right.
like
It
that.
was a series of evergreens and vegetation.
Yeah, and just one other thing, on the other side, where the homeowners over there were complaining about the
Mhm.
noise from the wash, the car wash. Did you say you put a stockade fence in there too?
Now, part of the approval was to install some additional fencing. It has not been installed.
Okay,
I don't believe it has been installed. Not yet.
so is that gonna be installed?
It's still in the plan set. It will be, it will be installed.
Yeah, and kind of summing things up, I think it kind of sounds like this could be an item that we put on the next agenda as a consent item.
Thank you,
Um,
Eric. I can take care of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Am I done?
I'm not if you don't want to be. Go ahead.
I'm done.
All right, thank
I'm
you.
just getting back at you.
The, I agree with my colleague to my right, the only Rick that is here tonight. And at the same time, I think this is almost there. I think some of the issues that remain are trying to figure out what we're looking at on some of the plan sets and getting a really clear statement of what stays, what goes. Certainly getting a good sense of when that fence will go in. Because it's kind of been hanging fire for a while there. So I'm inclined to think that this is something that should be a consent item. I'm not ready to pass it tonight. We don't have a motion ready. But I think at the next meeting, if you can get things going with the staff, I think this can go up as a consent item. It would be basically first on the agenda, or whenever you get your material in. And I think I've heard your answer to all of the questions. And I think you've answered all of them, but I really would like to see the answers. I would like to see the new plan set and the new discussion with the staff. And then that would certainly give me comfort. And I think then it would be really ready for approval. But I can be outvoted, but I'm not ready to vote on this tonight. Angela?
I guess I'm also curious, because you had mentioned, it sounds like you're relying a lot too on the fact that DEP is amending your permit and that you have technical review going on right now, which I think would probably help, I would say, with our peer reviewer and as well as town staff, that has been like fully vetted as well. So do you know where you are in that process, or when you
think
might see something from
Our
DEP?
conversation seemed to be, it's a minor revision, not a full amendment.
Yep.
Did you?
Just got comments from Chris Baldwin.
Okay.
Cumberland County Soil and Water Conservation District.
Great.
Pretty.
Speak into the mic, please.
Yeah, we just received comments from Chris Baldwin, who's with Cumberland County Soil and Water Conservation District today. He had some similar comments to what Woodward and Kern had as well, but pretty minor in nature, and we feel like we can address them.
And I guess that's what I guess I'm at, is saying, it sounds like when you have kind of the DEP vetted, you also, sounds like usually that is typical. Our comments and peer review comments usually align with Chris, and he usually forwards those to me, but I didn't see those. But I might not have checked, but it seems as though if those are all aligned together and they come back with that in hand, it seems like staff would support that as well. The consent idea.
Thank you. For the board consent, what that means is we've done that before. They go back to the planning. We think they're almost there, but they got this much left. Consent? See you next time. Consent agreement. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Madam Chair, if I could make one request for a clarification. You had identified seeing a revised plan set, short of the simple stormwater, which I think might be report, not plan. Are we referring to the boulders and the delineation of the snow storage area, or was there something else that
I'm certainly referring to that. And it's sometimes been difficult to figure out what plan set or what page I was looking at. What was there before, what you're proposing, what you might have put in between what was there before and we had approved. In other words, you talked about the history and you talked about moving forward. Let's take like to take a hard look at the final proposal. I can't tell you what we don't need. So work with the staff because I think given the confusion that we have, I want to know where the snow storage is certainly.
Yeah, I think those are
that
easy
sort of
and
stuff.
yeah, I think all of those are easy enough. I think if we were to document a history of previous approvals, it might just add more.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Even if it's maybe for the board's benefit, a series of 3 figures, right? Or how many amendments? I can't remember how many amendments you had.
We've had a lot of amendments.
Right. One approval, one extension, one amendment.
Well,
here
and
we-
then also the existing condition, which is also
Right.
another factor, which is not really captured here, so.
And any plan sheets, I know, at least from my perspective, and I'm sure the board shares this sentiment, is if you add something on a plan sheet in the narrative, just say, we've added the snow storage area, you can see it on sheet 5 of 11 or whatever it is, so we can just go right to it and see it right there in front of us, so.
If I could, we won't add any of the exhibits as plan sheets, just because I think that will make it more confusing. We'll just provide a supplement. This is what was approved. Does that make?
I think that can work. Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for
All
your
right.
review.
Thank
Have a
you.
great evening.
We usually take a break at 8:30. I know there is only one group left. I'm going to ask your indulgence so the board can take a break now. It is 5 minutes, and then we will return and begin the work on Riverbank LLC. Riverbank LLC requests a site plan amendment review for proposed single-story building with 2 commercial tenant spaces. The property is located at 370 US Route 1, Assessors Map U39, Lot 44. Eric?
Thank you. So Riverbank LLC is requesting a site plan amendment for a site in the B3 zone at 370 Route 1. It would involve construction of a 5,500 square foot commercial structure, which would have 2 tenant spaces that would be leased. The proposal would also eliminate the length of the existing curb cut to only allow access to the southern portion of the site. The board should have gotten materials on a zoning board of appeals approval for the site to allow work to be done in the 75-foot stream setback. This site needs setbacks from Route 1 and the stream, so it's a relatively constrained site. Staff's main comments revolved around utilities, provision of an in lieu fee or construction of sidewalks to accommodate pedestrians. And we've provided a draft motion of approval for consideration by the board. With that, I turn it back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And for the developer, for Riverbank LLC.
Thank you. Thanks, Eric. Good summary. Sashi Meisner, landscape architect here on behalf of Riverbank LLC to present 370 US Route 1. Also joining via Zoom if needed are my consultants, the engineering consultants from Ransom Consulting. So I will, as Kylie mentioned, not answer stormwater questions directly, but they'll be here if needed.
Is there someone specifically you want me to move?
It should be Maureen McGlone and David Vitale.
Okay. Sorry, apologize.
Okay. So 370 US Route 1 is the old Cliffs flea market site. So it's been vacant for quite a while. It is right on US Route 1. So as Eric mentioned, there are 2 curb cuts. We're showing removal of the curb cut to the east. We're going to retain the curb cut to the west. That curb cut is actually quite wide. I think it's somewhere above 35 feet. So we're reducing that to meet the town standard. The blue line shows the stream setback. So you can see the existing building as well within the stream setback. And that's why we were at the zoning board of appeals. They did approve us to reconstruct something within the stream setback. So we're maintaining this corner right here with the new building and constructing from that corner. We're holding that corner and building from there with a new, so this building is 5,700 square feet. The new building will be 5,500 square feet. This building you can also see is the orange line that scoots across the front is the front setback. So you can see the existing building is encroaching on that. So this new proposed layout will meet the front setback. So we've tried to get the property as conforming as possible. And we think we've done our best. Just a refresher, so you can be current with what the site looks like. We are the existing building will be removed. You can see that the front esplanade is paved, but there is no sidewalk connecting this property. So we'll be turning that back into a green landscaped area. We have full utilities along the front of the property. So we'll be aware of trees growing into those, and we've sized things appropriately. The adjacent property, Cabinets to Go, has recently been improved. So we think this will be a really nice addition to that. What the applicant is proposing is a 5,500 square foot, 2-unit leased retail spaces. So as the old building has the front entrance on the front of the building, these two lease spaces will have entrances on the left and the right. We're using the access that I mentioned right here, so people can come in, park on the left side, or go across and park on the right side. The applicant does not have secured tenants right now, so he has been discussing with someone about a potential cafe. So we have sized the amount of parking spaces based off of 1/2 being a restaurant use and 1/2 being a retail space. So we are showing 32 parking spaces. We intend that anyone using the site or coming to the site, whether they're going in unit 1 or unit 2, could park on either side of the building. We are showing a walkway that connects across the front. So there's a walkway that goes here and cuts across and joins the two spaces. So if you had to park in one side and you were going to the opposite side, you'd have safe passage to get to that other door. There's a shared dumpster on this side to the rear. It'll be fenced and screened. We have a small little outdoor seating area on this side, mostly intended for employees, like a picnic table, things like that. And then on the other side, the spacing of the way the site laid out allotted us a little bit more room for more outdoor seating. So right now it's potentially the cafe would go in this side and have some outdoor seating on that side, which would be nice. We have, for stormwater, we're using pervious pavers along this portion of the parking lot, and then pervious pavers along this portion. And we also have a roofline drip edge along the back of the building, and the entire roof slopes towards that. So those are our 3 main areas of treatment. We've retained as much of the woodland buffer that's to the stream side as possible, and we'll be restoring whatever's been disturbed after this is all built. For landscaping, we are providing a significant buffer along the front of the parking area. We had just shy of the room that we needed on this property, so we are having some landscaping within the right of way. Again, we're using some smaller trees in this area because of the overhead wires, but as you go around the corner, we're using some larger deciduous trees. And then on the left side of the property, we've added some landscaping at the entrance, and the adjacent property has some nice evergreens, and we're adding another evergreen on this side. And this kind of bleeds into the existing woods to the rear. At the front of the building, between the walkway and the building, we've added some substantial landscaping, really three season colors, fall, some fall colors, and spring and summer flowers. This is right along the front of the building, so it will be quite attractive. As far as architecture, it will be an improvement from what is existing, which doesn't tell you much, but we're looking at, this is the front along Route 1. So a ton of windows, getting a lot of natural light into these two spaces. So this is where all that landscaping, the perennials and low shrubs would go, and then 2 trees on either side to kind of frame the building. The back of the building does have a little bit of light which will actually be kind of pretty as it would go into the woods to the rear. And then both sides of the building have these really great entrances that highlight the businesses that will inhabit the building. And I think that's about it. I do have other plans if you have more detailed questions, and if you have stormwater questions, we have our Maureen or David.
Thank you. This item is subject to public comment. Is there anybody in the room who would like to charge up to the podium and make a public comment? Angela, do we have anyone online? Who have, wait a second, Karen Martin is charging up.
All I want to say is thank you for for coming forward. You know, this property has certainly been a distressed property for a while. And so I have talked to people who are interested in the property, and by all means, I'm not going to comment on anything within the purview of the planning board, just to say we are I, as the economic development director, is very excited about the project.
And you are who? Thank you, Karen. Do we have anybody online? All right, public hearing is closed, public comment period, and for the board.
Here again?
All right.
All
yeah.
right. Well, usually sometimes I get forgotten today. I have a couple quick questions maybe for the board. On my list, this is a site plan amendment review, and I did miss a meeting a while back, but is this supposed to be a site plan review? Is that, we're not?
So we do have a site plan on file for this property. I believe it was Main I something that was approved back in 2014 or 15. Yeah, 15. Yep. Thank you. So this would be a site plan amendment.
Okay, so technically it's site plan amendment, but it's completely different than what was there, right? Or no?
Yeah. Yep. That's correct.
Okay.
They're not amending a plan that was for them. It is amending a plan that was for someone
Yeah,
else.
I guess I'm just trying to figure out procedurally. So I think in my mind, I think sometimes they do an inventory analysis, right? And then we do a preliminary site plan review, and then we do a site plan review, and then we move forward from there. So are we skipping the inventory and the preliminary, and we're going basically right to site plan?
So I think you're talking about like the plan development process.
Well, with the inventory, yes, the plan development.
Yeah.
But I think almost every time we do a preliminary site plan review and then the site plan review, right?
Generally, yes. This project was actually on the agenda for the May 16th meeting. And it was tabled at the request of the applicant. So they've actually had a chance to address at least the staff comment, even though this is the first time that the board is seeing this project. So I guess that's kind of why they have a little bit of a head start. But the board certainly can weigh in on any issues or comments it has on the site, just like we would a normal site plan.
Are we voting on anything tonight? I don't have, oh, I do have a draft amendment. Okay. Okay. I guess it's, generally when I saw it was a site plan amendment, I didn't do as good a thorough job as I should have gone through this. Because if I had known it was a site plan, I would have actually gone through all the drawings and details. So I'm not as prepared as I should be. I do think it's definitely going to be an improvement over what's there now. I don't necessarily, I bet Jen would have fun with your traffic pattern and stuff here, because I don't necessarily see how that all works, but and I think Rachel will probably talk about, you've got like 4 different kinds of siding going on there, right? So it's all very colorful. I think it looks good, I guess. You got clapboards and then shingles. And then, yeah, it definitely looks better than what's there. Angela, have you looked at this stormwater? Sorry.
Yeah, Angela, maybe you would
Again,
like
I thought
to
it was a site
talk
plan
about
amendment,
the
so.
storm, maybe you'd like to talk about the stormwater, and that may answer questions from other members of the board.
Well, I guess where this is an existing site and it's, I don't know if you'd call it pavement or compacted gravel. I think it might have used to be, right? So there's a combination here that this is a very developed site. So maybe the applicant could speak to the reduction or increase of impervious area that you guys are talking about. And you said online you have.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a good place to start for the board to understand what impacts you're having on the site or benefit.
Yeah, I will pass that over to either David or Maureen.
Or whoever is raising their hands.
They're panelists, so they should just be able to unmute.
Yeah, hi, this is David from Ransom Consulting. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
So right off the bat, as far as an impact goes, we're looking at an approximately, well, the exact number we got is 1,192 square feet reduction in impervious area on the site based on the proposed conditions. I don't know if you want me to speak more generally to the plan. I'm happy to, and the proposed stormwater treatment.
I guess that's where, if that answers your question, right,
Well,
that's really
so-
looking at, it's quite a significant,
It's dirt right now, right? And
But
been
it's
dirt for 100
compacted
years.
gravel, so it's
compacted
considered
gravel, so it's
impervious.
considered impervious. So I guess what you're saying, David, is we're not paving all the compacted gravel?
No, so the site would be all, the proposed site is pavement for the parking areas.
I think the proposed site is compacted gravel. I used to go, I've been there a million times, back when it was the Rainbow Disco and then the antique shop a few hundred times with my wife. So I'm pretty sure it's dirt, gravel, compacted gravel. So what was your answer? You said it was tar?
Yeah, it'll be pavement is my
It
understanding.
will be in the future. It will
So,
be.
yeah.
Proposed.
So it's reducing.
Proposed, yes.
Proposed, but it's reducing the amount of overall impervious area at the site. So what they're saying is they're having a positive impact, I guess, environmentally on the site.
Okay, I buy that, especially if Angela says it. Was there a peer review on their stormwater deal? Because I didn't see a peer review. Maybe I didn't look good enough in my box. Again, I thought this was an amendment.
Yeah, we did have Woodard and Kern review this, and they did provide a memo dated June 2nd. And the only comment that they had, so like I had mentioned, this was going to be on the May meeting. So they got Woodard and Kern's comments as well as ours, and then had a response. And then they provided us a memo that basically said the main DEP permit should be forwarded to the town when they have it. And that was Woodard and Kern's only comment on this rendition of the plan.
Okay, so I think it's safe to say Woodward and Current and staff are happy with the stormwater, which is probably the biggest deal. And then let me just look at your driveway real quick.
I could just say as well, existing, it's all of the water hits the site, flows down through those gravel compacted parking areas and flows right into the stream. So what we're proposing is a total improvement on treating that water before it gets anywhere near the stream.
Okay, so
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, this is Maureen McLone at Ransom Consulting. Just wanted to clarify that this existing site is less than an acre in total. And therefore, obviously, there's less than an acre impervious, both existing and proposed. So DEP stormwater requirements don't technically apply in either treatment or in the flooding standard, which is pre versus post. And what we're proposing for this site in using the pervious pavers and using the roof line drip edge we're proposing now to treat 85% of the existing impervious, where there was no treatment there before. So while none is technically required, we're doing it anyway. And as far as the quantity goes, we're keeping the, excuse me, we're keeping the post flow rates to below that of the pre. So the reality is that what we're providing is a market improvement for the stormwater, as well as that the treatment of that stream. If that helps.
Okay, that sounds good, Maureen. Thought that was God talking to me for a minute. I didn't know.
Well, it is. So,
Okay. So I'm pretty in favor for this, just so you know.
Rick, if you look at the stormwater plan submitted by Ransom Consulting,
Yeah.
page 4, it shows the pre-development and the post-development
Close, yeah.
stormwater.
Okay.
And the post-development is better than the pre-development.
Okay. Thank you. That makes sense. If Woodward and Kern's happy with it, that's pretty good. I don't think I've ever seen a Woodward and Kern peer review with one note, so.
It's the second round.
All right, so right now you can, there's no curb there, if I recall. You can pull in and out any way you want, and you have this one single curb cut, right? So that's in line with the code, with the current standards and all that stuff. Yeah, I'm good. I did notice you got a picnic table in the snow storage area. I'm a little concerned about that.
Different seasons.
You're gonna move that
So they
picnic
would
table, right?
rotate it. Yeah. They would move this picnic table.
It is nice that you have a picnic table there, though. That's nice. I like that. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't prepared for a site plan review, but from what I see, I think it looks fine. Yeah. And you don't have any, you did your traffic study. I guess the traffic study doesn't necessarily take into account the type of businesses, or does it, Angela?
So, I mean, one of the things that we do for commercial buildings that have multiple tenants is that we condition any approval on having the applicant provide a traffic assessment or a parking needs kind of inventory on what's required for any particular use that's going to be going in or increased from what was approved. So if this ends up not being a restaurant or the restaurant increases in size from what it was approved as, they would need to provide a justification for how the parking demand is met on site. And that's something we'd review at the staff level.
So this was originally approved as one tenant for a Vision Place, right?
I believe so, but I don't know the specifics. I
Okay.
didn't look too detailed at the old plan.
So now it's two tenants, but we're not sure who they're gonna be or what they're gonna be, because it's, you know, we obviously can't see into the future, but what was the traffic study based on for tenants?
It was based on a restaurant and retail.
A restaurant and retail? So is that what you're thinking might go there, is restaurant and retail?
Yeah, that's what I mentioned, that the owner is in discussion with one potential tenant as a cafe. So that's how the parking was designed, and that's how the traffic study was done.
So Eric, if I get a question for staff, so if we don't, and this isn't just for this particular project, but we've had other projects like this where we don't necessarily know who the tenants are going to be because, you know, you don't always know. Do we redo the traffic study based on who actually goes in there?
I mean, I'd say generally no, unless it's some huge, you know, demanding use. Like I had mentioned, we do require the parking be justified, and they kind of give us that trip generation rate, and we'll, you know, we certainly have our traffic engineers review that if it's, you know, that intensive. But you know, just like with the civil engineering piece, our traffic engineer got the May rendition of this. I believe Sashi and her team provided impact fee figures up upon request and a couple other smaller things. So it's kind of the same thing where this was basically the second time that staff had gotten to review it. But we would be working with our traffic engineer and at the staff level review the parking required.
All right,
If I
so-
can add to that, that's similar to other commercial spaces that have multiple units. We've required, and it's been a condition of approval, which can be added to this, that at the time of a building, because they still have to have a building permit as they renovate those unit spaces individually, right? So if you're doing, they come in with a restaurant first, they get a building permit to fit up that space. They would have to come in with also a memo providing us to say this is similar in use and similar traffic. Same, and then the second unit would also need an additional building permit for to fit up that space for what their need, and if that became a doctor's office as opposed to a bakery or whatnot, they look at those numbers and that would determine before they got a building permit, and it can be contingent on the building permit. If that helps.
Yeah, that does help. So as a condition of approval, we could say that the traffic study would have to be looked at again, or how? I don't know,
Well,
but-
trip generation rates would be
Yeah.
provided for the use that they're proposing.
Okay.
So one of the comments that we had was, it just says, as of now, this building has speculative tenants. As we've seen with other projects, the applicant should be aware that as tenants come in, they must be below the parking and traffic thresholds established for the site. So that would basically be a condition.
Yeah, so here's my concern. The bakery makes sense from what, and is in line with what I've seen with other traffic studies, okay? So AM peak hours, it's 15 in, 12 out, 27 total. So this cell phone service place has 2 AM peak trips and in and 1 out. So one person's staying there for a while. I'm not leaving. But either way, I'm not an expert on traffic studies, but I can tell you the cell phone one looks extremely low compared to what I've seen. So, I mean, 2 AM trips in, 1 out, and then 3 PM trips in and 4 out on Route 1 right there. If that's all the business that place is doing, it's not going to be in business very long. I mean, the bakery has 15 in, 12 out, and then 15 in and 10 out, which still, you know, I think it's low, but it's consistent with what we've done in the past.
I guess keep in mind that that's 1 hour. So within that peak hour, it's not all morning, it's within that, like, so it ends up being your commuting hour.
Yeah.
That their peak might not align with the commuting traffic on Route 1.
Okay.
But the bakery may, so it has higher numbers. Sorry, not to get in the weeds, but I just wanted to keep that in mind, that it's just for that 1 hour that
Yeah.
there's the most traffic on Route 1.
That still helps, but I'm not buying the 2 trips in and 1 out. Okay.
No,
There's
and
no
that's-
way.
yeah.
Not if you stand in business more than a week. So I would want a note in there to say that the traffic study has to be redone for whoever the tenants are. I mean, we had a similar thing last meeting where they weren't doing a traffic study because they were having nobody come in and nobody leave. And you know, when that one comes back for a site, I like the fact that everybody, just want to be fair. Everybody pays their fair share. So whatever goes in there, we do the traffic study for whatever business is in there. Other than that, I think it looked great.
Thank you. I will, Chad, you go first. You haven't gone first yet. On this side.
Yeah, I guess I was curious, will there be rooftop mechanical units or any sense of how the building would be served?
I believe the HVAC will be in the back of the building. To the back, they're doing, I think he's doing heat pumps so they won't be on the roof.
You just might want to watch out as that roof is all shedding to the back. So all that water is going to.
Yeah, I don't know exactly where he's planning to put them, but that will be definitely a concern.
And then I guess just maintenance of such. The slopes seem pretty steep back there.
Karen? No, no questions? Okay, Roger?
I guess I'll have to go there.
Yeah.
Where are we now?
Any place you want to be.
Just so I understand, when this was before, this property was before the board a few years ago. I mean, we spent quite a bit of time on it because it's quite a challenging site because of the stream behind it and everything. And so basically, we're just piggybacking on that plan, that approved plan with modifications to accommodate this proposal.
I mean, I think it's, more detailed than that since it's essentially a new plan. But yeah, the ZBA did allow for development in that setback area to accommodate a project like that. I mean, it's pretty I think it was almost the same exact type of approval as the previous site plan. Yep.
So you're gonna demolish the existing building and the foundation as it's sitting on? Now, if they had not demolished the foundation, wouldn't they, and they just wanted to build on that, would they have to go through this zoning board of appeals and everything?
Yeah, so the zoning ordinance in the non-conformance section actually talks about if a structure is destroyed beyond, I believe it's 50%.
Okay.
So it talks about certain thresholds to get it to come back to the board.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Now, I mean, I agree with Karen. I mean, anything you can do there is great. And so I don't have any, I go, right now I'm fine with everything. And I think staff, anything that has to be done can be done with staff just to get this moving along.
All right, thank you. This whole project gives me a certain amount of trepidation because it is in a shoreline and resource protection area. And there is a stream back there. So the site itself is extremely challenging. And you've made a lot of, I think, smart decisions in how you're looking at it and what you're aiming for. I think in terms, for instance, of the, as I calculated, it looked like you had 35% of the lot shall be vegetated. And that's a lot of vegetation for a lot that size. And that's a great effort to protect the stream area and to provide the landscaping. But there are some picky things that I found that I really would like to discuss with you. One of the things is that in the design standards, the design standards require that the building have a relationship to the street, and that's along that whole Route 1 that's been construed to mean the doors are in the front. You've chosen something that is visually very good from the road. Certainly, without denigrating what you've done here, I'd say a pile of concrete bricks would probably be better than what we have now. But it is a good looking building. But could you tell me why you made the decision to put the doors on the side instead of putting them on the front to follow through that relationship to the road?
Yeah, I mean, like you pointed out, the site is extremely challenging to develop. We had to meet the front setback, so that puts the building where it is. We really had no flexibility as far as where we put that building. So you can't get parking in front of the building. And the parking was being pushed to both sides. So you have the front door with the traffic movement right in front of it seemed like a conflict. We would rather have people on the either side with safe access to the front door instead of putting in the front door and having this thoroughfare through there. So it seemed like the logical thing. And it's especially relevant to how he's choosing to use the building as 2-unit spaces. So it's not optimal for sure. We would do it a lot different if we had more options, but just with we had no flexibility as far as where the building goes and how circulation could function on the site and be safe.
Okay. Could you describe, again, the building is visually pleasing. We require that it be in a type of New England vernacular. So could you describe to me what elements of the building are in the New England vernacular? I know you said it reflected other buildings on the road. Could you tell me what those were?
Yeah, and unfortunately, the architect who did the design is not here, but he did do a write-up in our application that kind of covers some of those bases. But we have, I believe it's Willow Place to the east of this, has a brick front facade and it has a couple of different materials in that building itself. And then I believe the bowling alley is 2 doors down, which also has the brick facade. So there might have been drawing upon some of these adjacent properties. Jaguar across the street is quite modern. I don't think he was looking for that aesthetic. And our immediate adjacent neighbor there, Cabinets to Go, is just kind of a traditional little house style structure. So I think it's just kind of getting a commercial feel. And I think the large windows across the front really have that that nice street frontage feel that you're looking for, as well as, the landscaping that will go with it will be quite nice. And I think he's looking at, the signage that goes in will be attractive. But I think, those 2 immediate ones I can think of that have similar materials to what the applicant chose.
Okay, thank you. We have had in the past parking lots that are approaching a steep incline or decline in this case. And we have in the past required there be guardrails to ensure safety so that a car doesn't end up down in that stream. What did you consider in terms of safety for the parking?
Well, we're using curbing and we are a little ways away. I'm trying to scoot down to the grading plan here. So we are a little ways away from the steep topography. So it really, the slope picks up right here. So we have a good 20 feet or so. And then there's a curb line right here. So that's a good 6 inches. That would be a stopping point. And then over here, your vehicles are directed into the wrong, and they're, not directed towards the slope. So it's really just this one that we would be looking at. But I think we felt that there was enough room there to be able to stop your vehicle before you hit the wooded slope.
On the southern side and the parking there, what's the, I couldn't figure out from the plan set what the setback is of the parking spaces from the line. What was that?
How far we've located them from the property line?
Yeah, the southern, right there. Yep.
Yeah, I believe it's about, I don't know the number exactly, but I want to say about 3 to 4 feet.
What's the requirement, Eric?
Well, the building setback,
Not the building, the parking to the side.
I can look that up.
While he's looking that up, you've got a couple of waivers, and one of them creates a dilemma. And that is you've asked to, in order to have the 2 rows of parking on the north side, you've asked to plant into the town right of way. Now, I understand that you're agreeable to providing funding for the multimodal in lieu of a sidewalk there. That, however, doesn't mean that there won't be a sidewalk there at some point. And if we grant the waiver to move you into that area, the town right of way, and the town wants to come and put in a sidewalk, you do understand that you're going to have to be tearing up
Right,
your landscaping.
right.
And then that doesn't actually give you a 15-foot setback. And that creates then a problem with your parking. Is that correct?
The sidewalk would go within the right of way, isn't that
Right, but you want to put your landscaping into the right of way.
right? Right.
So that you would have that would allow you to have the 15 feet.
Right,
When you eliminate the 15 feet, because the town has put in a sidewalk, you've got a kind of Hobson's choice there. You then either come back to us with a request that we waive the setback requirements, or you end up tearing up part of your parking lot. So that's something that is, you have a waiver request to us to put it there, to put your landscaping into the town right away. I just want to make sure you understand the ramifications of that.
Yep.
If a sidewalk comes through.
Yeah, and we might be able to fit both of them. Should a sidewalk go in, there might be enough room for both the landscaping and the sidewalk to be accommodated within that, because we're not taking up the full right of way for the landscaping. So there's still seemingly plenty of room to fit, should that happen.
Then why didn't you do it now if you didn't
'Cause
need to go into the access, into the town right of way?
Well, no, I'm saying within the right of way, see there's this dashed line right here. This is the portion that we're extending our planting in, but there's still this much room that could accommodate a sidewalk should that happen. Or, whether the sidewalk goes right along the property line and the landscaping goes between the sidewalk and I feel like that this applicant would work with the town should this happen. I don't know what the time frame for that to go in, but I feel like the benefit of this is worth it. And we'd rather have the landscaping there now. And then if the town was ready to put the sidewalk in, to work with the applicant to make a suitable solution that works for everybody.
All right, Eric, could you add that? Yep.
I guess my thinking is when you're in that area anyway, it's probably the cheapest time to build the sidewalk. Is the applicant opposed to, I guess, building the sidewalk now? Because then you could accommodate your landscaping. As you said, you can kind of accommodate your landscaping and the sidewalk and not have to get into the issues that the board is struggling with on what happens with your landscaping.
I don't know. I
is the
think
same.
we kind of took a lead from Cabinets to Go, which I imagine was here not too long ago. They have their landscaping right in the right of way and no sidewalk, and they're parking right up there. So I think we were kind of figuring that might be, and we took guidance from the planning staff that there was no sidewalk being proposed here. And so we didn't even consider putting a sidewalk in because it didn't seem like that was happening. If that is desired, we would just need to be told that.
I think it's basically, it's up to you as long as you understand and the applicant understands the ramification of the
Mhm.
request for the waiver. Angela's offered something that actually would give you the opportunity to have the sidewalk. Basically, you're spending the same money you'd be giving the town, and putting in permanent
Right.
landscaping. so that you don't have to come back to us if all of a sudden the town says, yeah, we're going to zip a sidewalk all the way down Route 1.
Right.
So, you know, you think about that.
Okay.
And if there's a way we can word their option there, Eric, you don't have to tell it to me right now, but there's a
Well-
way we can word that option
Yep.
to give them that sort of flexibility, so that they're not back to us in a year or in a couple of years ripping out some more mature trees.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Eric, did you get an answer on the side setback?
No, I can't find any setbacks for parking.
Yeah, it's not my understanding that there are in this zone, at least.
Okay,
I think in the past, I've given kind of a rule of thumb, just making sure that an applicant can maintain their pavement, because you can't just go up to the line and expect, if the pavement starts undermining or crumbling, you have to stay on your property to maintain it. And I guess that's where I've tried to at least give some guidance to give some sort of buffer there, or for you guys to even establish grass in that area to stabilize it, is important, because you want to stay on your property with that. So that's been kind of the rule of thumb. And I guess I've told residents, I usually suggest on a residential lot, talking about 5 feet, just because people mow and different things like that. But where this site is so constrained, I guess I'd be looking for the applicant to justify that they can maintain that pavement in the amount of room they're talking about.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I didn't get the exact dimension of that, but I can get the exact dimension. I mean, we felt comfortable that we have curbing along that edge. We felt comfortable that, you know, cars are not going to be overlapping into the adjacent property. I can, you know, figure out what that dimension is and let you know. But
let me suggest that we put that as another one of the conditions of approval. And that is that the applicant work with the town to the planning board, the planning department, to ensure that the landscaping and grass at the southern end of the parking lot can be maintained, something along that line. That gives you the opportunity to figure out how you're going to do that.
okay, thank you.
Some out of curiosity, do you have a % of square footage of the site that's actually in the 75-foot buffer?
Not on hand.
Okay. And final item that I have, in terms of the patio that you have, we usually require some sort of barrier on a patio where people may be sitting and cars kind of driving past. And by a barrier, what we have had in the past is planters out there, so that people know that this is the drop off to the drive-through right there, to the driveway. So I would suggest that you add some planters around that outdoor patio, or some other sort of sign that this is the end of the place where you're going to be sitting and eating. So
Okay.
that there's some pedestrian safety there.
Yep, that sounds
All right,
good.
Eric, if you can put that down. And that, I believe, is all I have. Anybody else have anything? And let me say, I really appreciate hearing from you how you worked to get this site to work with all of the difficulty, what your thought process was, what your rationale was. I'm basically in agreement with all of the decisions that you made. I'm not sure you had a lot of other choices. I do want to suggest that Chad had a good question in terms of the HVAC and whether it's HVAC or heat pumps. I thought it might be heat pumps, but if the roof is slanting in that direction, I had an outdoor generator and the ice came off my roof and cracked the top of it. So that is something that you really need to take a look at and ensure is safe.
Yeah.
And if you determine that you're going to put the outlet, the HVAC, the equipment on the roof, you're going to have to find a way to screen it.
Okay.
Okay. Eric, also make sure that the HVAC, the whatever, whether it's the HVAC or the heat pumps
Yep.
in the back are provided with some sort of safety measure
Yep.
to ensure that any water coming off the roof or any ice is not damage. Anything else? Gee, that was fun. Okay. We have a draft motion.
We do.
And Eric's going to hand it to me once we get down to E.
Yep.
Can I just
Sure.
ask one question because I'm looking at the draft? The applicant had noted that you do not need a DEP permit. And that's what they were in the draft. I just want to make
So-
sure that that's,
We
is
do not.
that accurate or?
We have a.
It's less than a.
Can I answer that?
Yeah.
We don't need a DEP stormwater permit. We have submitted a DEP, a NERPA PBR
And a general construction permit?
and a
or
general
no?
construction permit.
No, you'll need it. Keep it.
Okay, Eric, have you, D, under conditions, talks about the construction of the sidewalks, has that been amended?
No.
So that they have their option?
Yeah. Does the board want to amend that? So it says one of the, I mean, right now it says construct sidewalks along Route 1 or pay the multimodal in lieu fee.
All right, I think that can stay as it is.
Yep.
The applicant has an option. Just so the board understands, we actually have two waivers. One is to reduce the width of the internal travel way from 26 feet to 24 feet. Is there going to be any question or issue with that? No. Nope. Okay. In that case, I have a draft motion. I move to approve the project titled 370 US Route 1, proposed by Riverbank LLC, as depicted on the plan set prepared by Ransom Consulting, dated 4/25/22, with the following findings and conditions. Findings: the proposed site plan amendment includes demolishing of an existing build structure and construction of a new commercial building on site. The project would involve creation of a 5,500 square foot single-story building with 2 units of leasable commercial space. The planning board has reviewed the application and supporting documentation and finds that the proposed design of the site adequately addresses the site plan review and zoning ordinance requirements for site utilization and layout, access, internal vehicular movement, parking, pedestrian ways, landscaping, stormwater management, lighting, architecture, signage, utilities, and storage. Waivers: number 1, based on the site characteristics and the evidence provided by the applicant, the board waives the requirement to maintain a 15-foot streetscape buffer street along the Route 1 frontage to enable better movement through the site and minimize the number of site curb cuts. 2, reduce the width of the internal travel way from 26 feet to 24 feet due to the low amount of estimated vehicular traffic, clear sight lines, and a protected pedestrian walkway. Conditions: 1, prior to issuance of the building permit, the applicant shall: A, revise plan sets and narrative materials to address comments in the staff memo dated 6/6/22. B, provide, and I'm crossing out B, correct?
No, I think we're keeping it, right?
Yeah, they just said.
The
that
permit by rule?
We have, 2 DEP permits that are.
We still need it?
Yeah.
Okay, B, provide its main DEP permit to the town. C, pay traffic impact fees in the amount totaling $9,029 to the town as outlined below. I, Dunstan Corner, $2,804. 2, Highgast Parkway, Route 1, $3,690. 3, Oak Hill, $2,265. D, construct sidewalks along Route 1 frontage or pay the multimodal in lieu fee. The amount of the fee is to be equal to the cost estimate for constructing a sidewalk and shall be reviewed and approved by the town engineer. E, revise application materials and plan sets as discussed at the June 6th, 2022 Planning Board meetings. This includes with respect to. Yeah, well, I hope so too. Oh, Lord. 1, travel and trip generation. 2, HVAC location and details, including safety measures for falling ice or water. 3, ensure landscaping and grass at southern end of parking lot can be maintained. 4, barriers to shield the outdoor seating area as proposed. This shall be reviewed by the planning department. 2, prior to the pre-construction meeting being scheduled, A, the applicant shall provide final construction plans. Any changes from the planning board approved plan must be approved by planning staff. Materials clearly showing revisions must be provided. This shall be reviewed by the planning department. 3, prior to the start of construction, a pre-construction meeting is required. The meeting shall include appropriate town staff, the developer, and their site contractor, and is to be coordinated through the planning department. Is there a second? Roger?
Second.
Second from Roger. Any more questions? Doreen, please call the roll.
Rachel Henderson,
Yes.
Roger Beely,
Yes.
Chad Reed,
Yes.
Karen Shoup,
Yes.
and Richard Dupleri.
Yes.
Thank you. Karen, you may heave a sigh of relief. And
Thank
we
you.
appreciate what you're doing there. It's going to be a remarkable improvement. Thank you very much.
Oh, here we go. Yeah.
Item 11, staff report. That was easy. Item 12, administrative amendment report.
None at the moment. We do have some accessory containers at a few businesses in town that are in the hopper, and I believe I've discussed some of these with Rachel, so I will keep you updated as we go through those.
13, minor development reviews.
None.
14, correspondence. 15, planning board comments. If Roger would like it noted that he found the minutes, I still have not found the minutes. I just want that.
I didn't have them ready when the packets went out, and it slipped my mind to print them before coming up here tonight. So that's my bad, my apologies. We'll get them for the next one.
We'll talk later. Is there any other planning board comments? No, thank you all. Motion.
Can I just add one
Yep.
thing? I just want to say I appreciate the board being patient with Eric and I trying to obviously fill a void that we have in staff right now. And so, yeah, any comments or questions you can get us ahead of time that we have time to do some legwork is much appreciated. So we'll try our best. And that's why obviously Karen left, but she's also a resource for us too. So I just asked you over the next few months to be patient with us as we kind of muddle through.
We don't bite frequently. Let's motion to adjourn.
Second.
No, I can't make the motion. Roger, you made the motion and I need a second. No. Yeah. Chad, do you want to second?
Make a motion.
I will second.
And Chad has seconded. Is there any objection? Seeing none, we're adjourned.